get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
Happy summer, Kneecaps Nation. We are back at it again for another edition of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar, that's me. Happy to be joined, as always, by my longtime partner in crime, Phil Byrne. And Phil, I hope you have access to a swimming pool or a nice ice bath or something like that, because we're going to need it with some hot, hot weather coming to the great state of Michigan this coming week here.
Yeah, we're going to get some sweat and humidity going along with those fireworks this week upcoming before the 4th of July here. It'll be a hot and sticky one. Hopefully you are going to be near a lake. I know that's going to be my plans for the 4th, being up north. So
excellent.
Hopefully it won't be quite as warm up there. Be able to get in and kind of cool off a little bit. But Vince, man, I don't even know where to begin with this week's show. I think if you're clicking on it, you saw what the episode podcast title was. But
if you listen to us on our last episode, you're probably thinking, hey, am I about to get gypped here? And the short answer is, yeah, you kind of are. You'll remember possibly that I ended last week's episode of me having a grandiose plan for this episode. We're going to do a little something more outside the box, something more that I kept as a surprise, kept it close to the vest, what that actual content of the episode was. And then the legal system did what they did over the last week, and that forced me to crumple up what I had planned for this episode and kick the can down the road for the next episode. So because of that, as a way to, in good faith, make inroads with you all for leading you on that we were looking at this grand, amazing episode. This is looking to be a good episode, but here's what I had planned originally, and it's something that affects everybody that listens to this podcast in some way, shape, or form, and it is the cost of being an NFL fan from a television standpoint. Just how much it costs you and me and Tom, Dick, and Harry to watch all the NFL games on TV, and just how exactly we got to this point, because it's becoming an issue for a lot of people, and I want to know just how far away we are from the tipping point. The tipping point is always there. It's just a matter of how far are we to that point. So I had that all mapped out and planned out for this episode, but because of actual Lions stuff that happened this week, I don't know if punting on that for the sake of something that we can talk about anytime is quite worth the squeeze. So we're going to do NFL and TV and an oral history behind the NFL on television and all that. That's coming up on our next episode, unless something even more juicy and scandalous than this story comes up. But no, I think we'll make time for it our next episode. But Phil, as we talked about back in February, March, back in there, and it was the Terrion Arnold fiasco. And you may recall that he had some stuff taken from his Airbnb, something to the tune of about $250,000 in cash and jewelry and just stuff that you and me and anybody else wouldn't want to have ripped off of us. Well, he got ripped off, and he decided, instead of just going to the authorities and letting them handle it the way they do, allegedly he took matters into his own hands and went after the people who he thought did him dirty and decided to just take back what was his and make them pay the price for it on the back end. Allegedly, of course, and there was never any charges filed at the time, and there was never any arrests made at the time. And even as recently as like 2 months ago, Dan Campbell came out, as brazen and brash as he usually is, and said this is a whole bunch of nothing, and we fully expect him to continue to rehab from his season-ending injury from last year and get himself back into game shape and this and that, and we all got nothing to worry about. Then the news from this past week dropped, and basically our worst fears and then some were confirmed that this whole thing did go down, that Terrion Arnold was the ringleader behind a kidnapping and assaulting and conspiracy, and including multiple other people involved, and basically finding three people who he thought stole all that stuff from him, and basically his associates, let's call them, spent about an hour just pistol whipping the you know what out of each of these three people. And Terrion Arnold was on FaceTime with one of the people hanging out in the background the whole time, and he was basically just barking out instructions and saying, hey, this is what you got to do, this is what you got to do, and this and that. And here we are. Now, Arnold is sitting in a jail cell waiting for a hearing Monday afternoon. So when this drops to your device, will be on the same day of the preliminary hearing. But as of right now, Arnold is sitting in a jail cell staring down the barrel of 8 felony charges that could carry up to life in prison. So again, Phil, are essentially just eliminate the team from here, just from Terrion in a nutshell. This is essentially worst case for a guy who is freshly into the offseason, for a guy that is trying to rehab his way back from a season-ending injury. Nothing that you want in on at all if you are a 23, 24-year-old kid like TA.
No, and I think the way to kind of talk about this is, let's first talk about Terrion Arnold and this scenario, and then kind of bring it into the Lions' perspective here.
Yeah.
Our first round pick, I think he had started to develop a reputation for being someone that was hardworking and kind of an honest kid, and one that, by most appearances, had stayed out of trouble. The issue here is very twofold. So, Vince, you are a homeowner. I am someone who works at a mortgage company. When you traditionally buy a home, whether it is in cash or in financing, you have to get homeowners insurance, right? It's to insure the property. He is drafted into the NFL as a first round pick, has more money than probably he knows what to do with. A lot of these players, even like Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown, they have gotten into using some of that money to buy additional properties. And with that, especially if you have enough money to purchase it all in cash or financed, you wonder what the steps of protocol are to making sure that everything is secured. I hear $250,000 in this property, and my immediate reaction is, first of all, what business is that amount of money being left in something where he probably is not going to actually be in the property at various periods throughout the year, instead of stowed away in a lockbox, some sort of secure facility? Secondly, if it is going to be in the property, these are things that you build insurance claims into. You insure valuables. It is not uncommon for people, whether it is fine china or new, necklaces, jewelry, things of that variety, to have that insured in case burglars come in and steal these things. There are so many things that led to this point where essentially some person that the Lions took in good faith and bringing into the organization made him a first round pick. Everything that we could tell, he was a good kid, had a good head on his shoulders, to where literally he is FaceTiming as part of the ringleader for whatever is happening here and going into this month-long investigation into the Hillsborough County, attorney's office. It's wildly disappointing. And he turned himself in. So it wasn't like a case of, him getting brought in on charges. So I think the evidence is likely there. And
well,
I
and
know,
you have to keep in mind also, Phil, is that they've had months. The prosecution has had months to get their ducks in a row. And then arguably the kill shot, 2 of the 7 people that have been charged, a couple of Terrion's associates or friends or whatever you want to call them, essentially flipped and basically showed the prosecution where the bodies were buried, and all roads led to Terrion, and here we are.
Yeah, they start throwing around life sentences and things like that, or and it's no surprise that you're going to get people to snitch on you. This is very common in criminal cases that are related to the mob. Where one big fish goes down because a lot of tinier fish after it, squealed, essentially. So that's kind of the first part, is just like the embarrassment from the whole situation. I don't know Terrion Arnold. Vince, you don't know Terrion Arnold. We don't know everything that went into the story. We are only kind of reporting on things or detailing things that have been made public to this point. But I also think it was very, very telling too that when he was not getting arraigned, but showing up for the court piece, that he was in the full blown gown that is commonly reserved to people that they believe could inflict self-harm to themselves. It's almost like a suicide prevention kind of gown. That is really telling. That is really sad that we've gotten to this point. But that's also the gravity of the situation. That something like this, that they have dived so deep into now, the cards are really stacked against him. And I know the second part of this is going to be the football related thing. I don't see where he will ever be a member of the Detroit Lions.
Well, and that's what you have to juxtapose and separate, is forget the fact, will Terrion Arnold be suiting up to play for the Detroit Lions this season? It's, will he ever step foot on an NFL field ever again? How much prison time is he looking at? Again, these charges, the way that they're laid out, he's looking at life in prison. I'm sure there's going to be plea deals or having sentences served concurrently or something like that. Again, I'm not a legal expert. I've watched plenty of Law & Order and Law & Order SVUs and whatnot to at least have a somewhat of a working knowledge on how things go, but I also know that cases aren't resolved in a 25-minute block like they are when Detective Carisi is up front doing the prosecution and everything. That's not how it works. So I understand there's a lot that I don't know. I have a hunch that he's probably not going to serve a life sentence for any of this stuff, but I don't think he's going to be in a position where he's going to completely skate away from serious prison time. Again, this is speculation. I don't have any sources. I'm just going off of what my gut feeling is. But that's the problem, like we said, Phil, is we have to separate the whole, what are we looking at from this guy from an NFL future standpoint, and you've got to look at it as, what kind of prison time is this guy going to get?
Yeah. There was no murder involved in this. The only thing I can kind of point to of similar stature would be like the Henry Ruggs scenario. He did get released, I believe, and got his time shortened because of good behavior. But even then, like, there is a line.
And to add insult to injury,
if you haven't played in 5 years too, like, the NFL is just way too. Those roster spots are way too of a hot commodity for players.
The league moves on.
Exactly.
is what it comes down to. The league moves on after so much time, plain and simple. And to add insult to injury, Phil, it turns out, just to kind of wrap the story behind it up, the three people who were pistol whipped and battered and beaten, who allegedly stole all this money and jewelry and possessions from Terrion Arnold, turns out from the investigation, none of the three actually had anything to do with it in the first place. So that just makes the situation look that much more junky and murky from a Terrion Arnold standpoint.
Yeah, it's not a good look. Not a good look at all. And as we kind of transition into the Lions piece of it, unfortunately, there's a number of different avenues to go down. Always kind of a hard transition when you talk about a guy possibly spending the rest of his life in prison, to how that will impact a Lion season. So I don't know exactly what point of the conversation you want to go into and how this
So
impacts
my
the Lions
question
fans,
to
but
you, Phil, and I'll just come right out with it, is the NFL and its teams know more than you and I know. They have
yeah.
access to information the likes of which that never actually truly sees the light of day. I don't buy for a minute that Dan Campbell knows what you and I know, that Brad Holmes and Rod Wood at the time or anybody knows exactly what we know when it comes to the inner workings of these players that they are paying millions upon millions of dollars to represent their franchise. I understand that there's PR involved, and Campbell or whomever is speaking at the time is coached up to say certain things. But I also know that Dan Campbell in particular is as honest and as blunt about what comes out of his mouth as just about anybody. As far as just typical coach speak goes, that's not something that he does. And I think that's why, in many senses, why Lions fans love the guy so much, because they know that he's as straight shooter as the day is long. But for him to come out and essentially just talk all this away and say it's not a big deal and this and that, are you really buying that, Phil? Do you think the Lions were as in the dark about all of this as we're led to believe that they were?
So I'll say yes and no, because I don't think, especially it being Hillsborough County in Florida, where Tampa is, I don't think they're going to necessarily go ahead and tip off the Lions to say, "Hey, we're actively investigating one of your players for something that happened."
But they don't
But you
have
bet.
to, though. I mean, a lot of times, if there's any type of scuttlebutt that our players might be involved in something, a lot of times you'd think there's proactivity on the part of the organization to figure this out internally without even having hope of somebody reaching out and tipping off the Lions that this is an issue.
So what I will say though is I'm believing here that, or at least what I believe the situation to be, I could see a scenario where Terry and Arnold met with Dan and Brad once rumors of things started to get out,
And they did the
and
whole, all right, is there anything you want to tell me?
exactly, and either Terry and Arnold lied to them or told them a half truth or did something to where they were under the impression that this was something that was going to get cleaned up and cleared out. And it certainly wasn't, because just a couple of weeks ago he was participating at minicamp,
Mm-hmm.
and he actually answered questions from reporters that were there,
As
as
recently
did
as
Dan
about
Campbell.
2.5 weeks ago.
Yeah. So I do believe that, like, a lot of times you just have to allow investigations to take place. But I also believe the Lions to be a smart enough organization to not make Terry and Arnold available for commentary if they know potentially this guy could have been guilty or would have been brought in, or this investigation would be headed in the direction it is. Something does not quite line up with what just happened a couple weeks ago.
So, do you classify this situation from a Lions standpoint, given the fact that the Lions used draft capital on building up their front seven, which was definitely a point of need, no doubt about it. And we've been essentially begging them to do things to the front seven as long as I can remember. But keeping in mind a shoe that could drop, the Lions did next to nothing to get a contingency plan in place should the worst happen with Terrion Arnold. So do you classify this as a situation where the Lions simply got caught with their pants down?
Yeah, I think so. I think so because as it stands right now, our 3 starting cornerbacks are DJ Reed,
who did not have a good year last year,
Rock Yassin,
who's a replacement level player at best.
And are you ready for it? Ennis Rakestraw, who I do not believe has played more than 5 snaps in the regular season yet.
Correct. He might as well be an AI bot or an idea at this point, more so than a sure thing.
So they did use the 4th round pick on that corner out of Arizona State. I think he's going to be more of a nickel back, so he's not even going to be
he'll split time with McCreary and
yeah. So I think this is something that they weren't anticipating. I think they were anticipating Terrion Arnold to be back in camp, to have this all cleared out and be playing. Because I'm going to be honest, like, I think the Blake Miller pick was a good pick. It makes sense to go ahead and bring Penei Sewell over to the left side.
And we know that this offense is at its best when the offensive line is shored up. So, again, totally understand it.
But hear me out for a second. You released Taylor Decker, who I believe, memory serves me right, hasn't signed with anyone.
I think you're right.
I would have rather kept him on the team, use what other cap space we have to bring him back. And instead of going Blake Miller in the first round, you go defensive end in the first round, and you come back in the second round and you go get another corner. If you knew that this was going to be a thing, you don't go ahead and push this off into the 4th round. And that's the situation we're in now. So again, this is constantly like, if we are a boat out at sea, there are leaks, and we constantly have to keep replacing these leaks. And this was something that safety is an absolute injury cluster F right now. The cornerback room, you at least, I think, my understanding, again, is how I'm feeling the story played out, was they at least knew what they had in DJ Reed and Terrion Arnold. And now they don't have Terrion Arnold.
And whatever you get from Rakestraw is icing on the cake.
Exactly.
And now you're eliminating essentially half of the Pollyanna scenario that you were going into 2026 with.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. So
not great, Bob.
No,
not great.
No, not great. And we'll get to like scenarios of what this looks like as far as alternatives moving forward in future episodes, because they're going to have to do something. I don't think just riding with DJ Reed, who, again, coming off a not good year, and hoping that suddenly Rakestraw goes from nothing the last 3 years to boom, Pro Bowl corner. You've got to exist somewhere closer to the center as far as that goes. But what I'm wondering as we kind of broaden our view here, Phil, is okay, so we called this out as Lions getting caught with their pants down. You're looking at the Frank Ragnow situation from a couple years back. You could argue that the Lions didn't quite do enough pre-planning for that. We've been talking from the very beginning of this podcast, Phil, while Ragnow was still actively, gainfully employed by the Lions in the NFL, that he could be walking out the door before we all know it. And he walked out the door seemingly before the Lions knew it. I can think of numerous other situations where the Lions perceivably got caught with their pants down. What's with some of these blind spots within the Lions organization, Phil? It seems like this is something that happens more often than it should for a professional franchise.
Yeah, and I don't know if we're cursed. I don't know if we're snake bitten.
No, Jeff Daniels and Peyton Manning got rid of that a couple years ago. So
we got rid of that.
We got no more curses.
Eventually, the Boston Red Sox and the Chicago Cubs won the World Series over in baseball. I don't know what's going on with the Cleveland Browns. They're probably never going to win, but at least like we feel like we should have somewhat of a shot here. To me, it just seems like when you try to go best player available, or you try to go ahead and invest in the players you have, you don't always get aggressive in free agency. You just there's always going to be some sort of hole that you have to go ahead and replace. It is literally the sinking boat. And you hope you got enough boat to make it to shore at this point. Listen, I think that offense, all things considered, yes, we don't have David Montgomery anymore. I think that offensive line should be vastly improved. But if we're sitting here because we've got absolutely nothing in that secondary that we have to score 45 points every single game, that's not going to happen. There's going to be some defense that's going to put Jared Goff on his ass, and we're going to get to 27 points instead of 45, and we're going to lose. Like, you can't expect us to score 45 points every single game.
Really? I heard that the Lions have the best running game and the best receivers known to mankind, and Jared Goff chant, and they're just going to go out there and body bag people 63-7 every game.
Mm-hmm. Maybe in Chicago, not here.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Here we are again, Phil, back to the can't have nice things discussion.
So mini camp and training camp and that kind of stuff is kind of the equal playing field. I'm sure we'll hear some of the stories of, Ennis Rakestraw looks pretty good. He looks pretty good.
Oh, of course.
Something. So, hey, listen, maybe that'll be the chicken soup that we need to kind of help our soul here. This is a tough scenario for us to be in. You look at that 2024 draft class and what an absolute bust it has been. An absolute bust. Like, nothing good has come from it at this point. I guess you've got Christian Mahogany, okay. Whoop-de-doo. You had, 5 picks?
Which, ironically enough, he's probably our weakest offensive lineman on the staff now.
Yeah. So, it was cool that the draft was in Detroit that year, but man, is that going to be a draft to forget?
Terrion Arnold, first round. Ennis Rakestraw, second round. Giovanni Manu, fourth round. Sione Vaki, fourth round. Makai Wingo, sixth round. Christian McCogany, sixth round. Wow. I think just like looking at him and saying them out loud, one after the other, makes it just seem worse than it actually is. Maybe if the draft would have been held in like Billings, Montana or something like that, maybe it would have gone a little bit better. I don't know. Maybe the fact that it was in Detroit was the continuation of the Lions curse. I don't know.
But either way, that is something that is going to be very, very hard to come from. Now, I've heard Makai Wingo, like, he's a good athlete. You got to find a space for him on this roster. But again, we're talking about some guy that hasn't even played yet. You look at everyone else, it's either like they're not going to be on this team. They're going to be at best a special teams contribution. At best, they're the worst starter that we've got on the offensive line. Way too many projects. Like, that is a really case example here of Brad feeling himself too much.
Well, and that's just it. When you're in your quote unquote window, and I know Brad has come out and said that he thinks windows, or the idea of windows, is just a bunch of boolah. But when you are in your window, that's the last time to start tinkering around with projects or this and that. You need to keep your foot on that gas pedal and going out there and try and win your fans, who, I mean, this is really who it's for, right? You play football for your fan base. Go win them a Super Bowl.
So we always talk about, I'm sorry, Vince.
No, that's it. What else is there?
So we talk about some of the other class organizations in the NFL when, things are going well. How do the Lions stack up? I think at numerous times we've shouted out the 49ers, the Ravens, sometimes even the Packers doing things the right way. We took two cornerbacks in that 24 draft. The Eagles also took two cornerbacks in that 24 draft. And the name that I think is unfortunately going to haunt us is the second Eagles cornerback that we could have had, and that would have been Cooper DeJean.
Yep.
So.
Yep. You're 1,000% right. And
hey, we like Iowa guys too. So
yeah, we just paid one of them a buttload of money too not long ago.
Yeah.
Crazy. Well, I wish this would have been a happier episode, but sometimes in life and in football and in our criminal justice system, life isn't always candy, nuts, and gumdrops. So here we are. Sometimes you take the junkie with everything else.
You know what you got to do, Lions? I'm bringing back to a story that we heard a couple months ago. Go sign that kid that was a cornerback that was standing outside Allen Park.
I forgot about that guy.
Yeah, go bring him in. Now's the
How
time.
ironic. How ironic. You got this guy that's out there picketing for a job, and they just ignored the guy. Well, now they're in pretty dire need, don't you think? So now this guy with a pizza box with his name written on it has a little bit of leverage in the circumstance, huh?
Yeah. Go sign that guy. Now's the time.
Have a good 4th, buddy.
You too.
That's going to be it for us here on this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. We promise that we will get to our case study and analysis of the NFL TV viewing experience on our next episode. We'll also give you any updates on the Terrion Arnold situation as anything unfolds over the next couple of weeks. We're going to take a week off, but we will be back at it again 2 weeks from now here on Kneecaps for Breakfast. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning. Go Lions. Forward on the field. Over and out.